Whether it be ghosts, unexplained figures of the night, strange sounds coming from the woods, UFOs in the sky, there are so many unexplained happenings happening all over the country at any given moment. These viewers sent in their allegedly true encounters with such unexplained beings and happenings. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and get ready for these creepy and unexplained horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. Dogman on the Highway by Mark L. My encounter happened 3 years ago. I had been helping a friend of mine, Brandon, get his car running. I spent a couple of days and a couple of nights helping him out, and on the fourth and final night, we got his car running and wanted to test drive it before getting on the highway. Brandon and his son got into the two-door car. We left Brandon's yard, and instead of going to the highway, we went down this dirt road, which ended in a roundabout. There are no houses down there, so we made the roundabout. We were heading back to Brandon's house. Myself and his son had to use the restroom pretty bad, so we stopped at the side of the road. Right when Brandon had his hand on the door and I had my hand on my door, that's when someone or something landed on the hood of his car. It shook the car violently, so violently that Brandon and I looked at each other and said, "What the hell was that?" It absolutely woke all of us up, I'll tell you that. None of us were asleep per se, but, none of us were super vigilant at the moment. Brandon turned on the headlights to see if anything was in the road. I turned on the dome light inside the car and I looked down for a split second, and that's when I heard Brandon say, "Mark, look." As I looked up and out the windshield, I saw it. It was a massive dog on 2 legs. I could make out the muscles on its arms and see some of the veins. It had claws for fingers, which had to be 18 to 20 inches long. They looked absolutely thick as well, and its hair was an orangish-reddish color. It had to be at least 10 feet tall. Then I saw the eyes, which looked like embers of a fire. That's how the eyes glowed. It was almost like a ball of energy was burning from within this creature. I saw my life flash before my eyes. When I realized exactly what I was looking at, everything I had read about online completely crushed my thought process. Then Brandon and I both looked at each other again. We both said, "I'm glad you're here because nobody is going to believe us." I was so shaken up by what I was looking at, I couldn't speak until the following day. As fast as it happened, it was gone. We could tell the creature was angry because it couldn't figure out how to get into the car to get us. It could have easily gotten us out if it really wanted to, but thank God it didn't. I'm glad we never got out of the car to relieve ourselves when I got home that summer night. I was as white as my shirt, and my mom asked me why I was so shaking and terrified. I couldn't really speak. I only told my mom about what happened the night before the following morning, and she didn't believe me at first, but I kept repeating myself about the eyes of the creature. It was a werewolf or a dogman that I encountered, and I'm sure of it. I've been wanting to share my encounter, but I've been afraid to share it because I don't want people to think I'm crazy, because I know I'm not. That encounter changed my life, and I barely slept for a couple of weeks because of what I saw. The eyes of that creature still haunt me. I've never returned to that location, but I know where it is. I'd like to return, but I definitely don't want to go alone. Unexplained Experiences on the Res by Dog Mom. My family and I have lived on a reservation in Idaho, the Nez Perce Reservation, in a tiny community for most of my life. We have lived here for 17 plus years, and I have experienced many strange things that we can't quite explain. We have even seen odd skylights around and above our house. I've seen orbs in our backyard. We heard strange noises at night too, which made our hair stand up and gave us an uneasy feeling. But one night, everything we experienced didn't even remotely compare to what happened. It was during the fall, probably late October if I had to guess, close to Halloween, when I went outside in the morning to feed our dogs. We had a whole pack of dogs and utilized our garage as a doggy area for them. They had air conditioning and a heater, and the doors were locked, so they were all safe out there. Nothing could get in, and they couldn't get out. So I went out to feed them, let them run around and get their exercise. Everything was fine. I put them up, locked the doors, and cleaned their air conditioning so the cold air could keep them cool. At this time, everything is fine and normal like usual, until at night, around 8 or 9 p.m., my brother goes out to feed them, and he comes back to the house crying and freaking out, telling me that our dog Dottie is dead. Panicking, my mom and sister went out to my brother to see what was going on. I stayed in the house with my dad. My sister came back in and told me what happened. She said that our dog Dottie had been cut open and drained. Shocked and in disbelief as to what she was saying, I wanted to go see for myself. She told me not to. It was gruesome, but I didn't listen. I walked out there, and to my surprise, what my sister said was entirely true. Our dog was perfectly cut open. Some of her ribs were missing, some of her intestines were missing, and her blood was like completely gone. My brother and mom were checking the area, and the other fur kids we had, and they were all clean but terrified and scared. They were all shaking in the corner. I started crying and ran back to the house, shocked at what I saw. Of course, my sister told me, "See, I told you not to go out there." I couldn't speak. I was in shock, thinking what or who could do that. All the locks were still locked, all the windows had screens so nothing could get in. Once I calmed down, I asked my sister what she thought happened. Knowing that we always have weird lights over our house, she thought that maybe it was something not from our planet. My family and I believe in the supernatural, cryptid, and the paranormal, among other things, but we don't know what happened. But whatever spooked us, we live in the same house, which has yet to happen again, and I hope it never again does. We still see strange lights, though. So, if it was something extraterrestrial, I really wonder what they were doing. Creepy Figure at School by MixedLawnMower. To this day, I'm unsure if I'm overreacting, but this happened a while back when I was in high school. I don't know if I was tripping, but here it is. I took an earth science class in my freshman year of high school. My teacher played this educational video about the Earth's physicality and tectonic plates or something like that. The video was directed more toward teenagers and younger audiences because the interviews and graphics were colorful and felt like a Bill Nye video. During the video, they interviewed these geologists and they explained absolutely everything about everything. However, during one section of the interview, as they were interviewing different scientists, this ominous-looking girl with tattered clothing, she looked a lot like the girl from The Ring, appeared in the background. After each B-roll cuts back to the scientist, the girl got closer and closer and closer until her face was finally in front of the scientist just glaring at her. Initially, I thought it was some sort of prank that the video was pulling, even though it was weird to do such a scary thing in an educational video meant for kids and young teens, with absolutely nothing to do with horror elements. But the creepiest part was that none of the class was reacting to what I saw. Absolutely no one. And keep in mind, my classmates were all high school freshman kids that are bound to say something, at least about what they were seeing. But no reaction at all. No comments, not even a gasp. I just straight watched the video and looked around at everyone and no one was overreacting or even seemingly noticing it. So, I don't know what happened. Did I mess up? Was I tripping? Am I in some sort of other timeline? I don't know how to explain this experience.
This happened a while ago but still haunts me. I really don't know how to compartmentalize it. And if I hadn't had a friend with me who saw and experienced the exact same thing, I would chalk it up to something I imagined. I'll keep my name and my friend's name out of this story, as I don't want notoriety for it. But I would like to explain exactly where it happened, as I would love to hear if anyone else has experienced anything similar to what my friend and I experienced that night. This happened back on October 13th, 1988. It was cold, and it was a Thursday evening. My friend and I had been at the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls, Iowa, since August, and it was our freshman year. We lived in some of the oldest dorms on campus. Her in Lothar Hall, and me in Bartlett Hall. We were just out for a walk after finishing studying, and we both felt like wandering and exploring. My friend had heard that they were working on making a haunted house in Lothar, and that some of her friends were working on it, so we decided to try and find where it was happening. Neither of us were awfully familiar with the full layout of the hall, so we were just kind of bumbling around, seeing what we could see. Apparently the haunted house was being made in the attic, so we made our way up the stairs to the highest level. However, the large doors at the very top of the center stairwell were locked and had dark fabric hanging from them on the other side. We could not hear anyone talking or moving on the other side, so we figured we would check out the floor below it. Down to the next floor, we found a very quiet floor with dorm rooms, and the width of the center stairwell was where a fire door was up to the right. And to the left, there was another fire door, but the door on the left looked older and was painted wood, not steel like the other. A quick look through the door to the right showed us a continuation of the hallway and more dorm rooms. Walking over to the door on the left, we noticed that there was a bathroom door to the left of the wooden door. This will be important later. I tried the handle on the door, and it would not turn. Believing it to be locked, I figured that was the end of exploring that floor. As I was turning away, I heard a metallic sound and my friend gasped in surprise. She said she grabbed the knob and then it turned in her hand the opposite direction she was going to turn it, and then she pulled away from it. I turned around quickly to see her now looking into a dark room with a now partially open door. My friend carefully pushed the door open wider and walked in looking around for a light switch. She had walked in far enough that I could no longer see her very well, and I looked along the left-hand side of the door frame for a light switch, finding nothing at what I felt would be the normal height for a switch. I arced my arm wider and found an antiqued style switch that it was about head height. Just as I was about to flip the switch, the light came on, but instinctively, I still flipped the switch, shutting them back off again. Again, my friend gasped, and I flipped the switch back, turning the lights back on. She had found another switch on a large timber pillar farther into the room. Looking around, we saw a large room, easily 100 feet long and 40 to 50 feet wide. There were two large dark wood staircases that crisscrossed each other that led up to a loft area that lined the walls. Large windows lined the room, as well as old-style hospital beds from the early 1900s. There was also an old-style wheelchair that looked like it had old ECG machines or something on it. On the other far end of the room, there was another door like the one we had entered, and there was light coming from under the door. While we were both fascinated by the room, something just felt wrong, like we were not supposed to be there. We both just left without saying much and just assumed that might be part of the setup for the Halloween house. Much later, my friend was talking to another one of her friends about the haunted house and asked how the hospital set ties into the whole thing. She was met with a blank stare. Long story short, this leads her to ask me what I remember about the room. I mentioned the large windows. We looked off on the side of Lothar Hall and could find no such windows. I suggested to my friend that we look to possibly find some sort of blueprints, or maybe we can look for the door again, but we were never able to find it. We explored everywhere, but upon us finding this set of windows that kinda looked like it, we looked into it, and we could see that there was nowhere near enough room to have a second floor loft and large windows like we saw. We tried doing research to find out if Lothar Hall ever had a room like that, and maybe tore it down, but no luck. In 1991, we got the help of a couple of resident assistants to get us a key to check out what was on the other side of that door. Entering now, the low-pitched ceilings, tiny alcoves with small windows, and lots of junk and storage. Wandering farther into the back of the attic storage space, we found several of the hospital bed frame heads and footboards in a much greater state of decay. The wheelchair and the machine thing, all covered in thick dust and cobwebs. I don't know what was happening that day. I don't know if we stumbled upon some alternate dimension, maybe some portal slip in time, I have no idea. Maybe it was another timeline, another universe, I don't know. But I just remember how things felt so wrong when we stumbled into that room. I wondered what would have happened if we stayed there too long, and where we would be now. When I was a kid, I do not recall what age I was, but I think I was in like 5th grade. A buddy of mine lived up the road. Every time I would walk past his house, every hair on my body would stand up. To give you more of an idea of what was going on in that house, there were times where I would walk past and look up at the attic window. I would see the face of some little girl and a tall man standing behind her. It was always a sign of something going to happen. See, my buddy, who I will call R, his parents never went in the attic. No one did, honestly. They always kept it locked. They knew something was in the house. I have a few scary memories that happened in that house, but I'm just going to share this one for the time being. This is one of the scariest things that happened to me there. I was staying the night at R's house. The room was on the 2nd floor, immediately to the right of the top of the steps. Next to his room were his parents' room. On the other side of the stairs, on the left, was his brother's room. On the far side left of the room was R's sister's room, and the bathroom next to her room. The attic door was on the opposite side of the room from the stairs. I was in R's room sleeping at the time. I woke up to use the bathroom, but it took me a minute to get up because I had a bad vibe about the hallway. My gut was telling me to go back to bed, but as a kid, I was not able to hold my bladder too long. So, I half asleep walked across the hall to the open door, into the bathroom. And then, I walked back to my bed. I saw the attic door slowly opening as I was walking back though. I saw what looked like a little hand wrap its fingers around the door. Then I saw the little girl from the attic pop her head around. The attic door was about 15 feet away from the bathroom. I see her head and closed the bathroom door and leaned up against it so it could not open. That is when I hear the little girl say, "Open the door," but there was something about her voice, it was off. It didn't sound human. I was scared and crying and said no. That is when the doorknob started wiggling, and it felt as if something was going to rip the door off its hinges at any moment. It went on like this for what felt like 20 minutes. I heard stomping away from the door and what sounded like someone walking up wooden stairs. The attic was the only place with wooden stairs in the house, so I knew it had to be going back to the attic. I waited for a few minutes to be safe. I peeked out the door and saw the attic door shut. I was scared, but I thought maybe it was R playing a trick on me, but he is the youngest in the house besides me. He doesn't have a little sister, so I reckon that it can't really be a joke. I went to check the attic door, but it was locked. I ran back to R's room, where he was still passed out. I tried like heck to go back to sleep, and finally did. When me and R woke up the next morning, he noticed I had a handprint on the back of my neck. It was huge. When he went to change his shirt, I saw he had fresh scratches on his back as well. We got dressed and went to my house, and he stayed the night at my house. I remember this day like it was yesterday. My hands are trembling just thinking about it. I will never forget the sound of her voice telling me to open the door.
This happened when I was in college, 4 years ago. I went to a university that was very close to an ocean on the East Coast. I made friends with some people on the weekend, and one guy in the group of people I met invited us to go out on his boat with him. He described his boat to a bunch of people, and was very proud to have it. It sounded like an expensive sailboat by the way he described it. Not really familiar with boats, and hadn't ever really been on one other than a cruise ship when I was like 11. This guy said his parents bought one for him, and that made sense because he was known to be a spoiled kid. He was nice enough though, and the idea of cruising around some Saturday afternoon and drinking some beers sounded appealing. After that conversation, I saw him around in school, but didn't really talk to him much, until one day he approached me in the library and asked if I still wanted to go sailing. I said sure, that sounded awesome, and he told me the following day he was going out on the water, and it would be a perfect opportunity for me to join him. After a lengthy conversation about how sailing works, and him assuring me it was safe and he had all the proper training, I told him I'd meet him at the docks the next morning. That night, my roommate asked me what I was doing for the weekend, and I told him that I made plans to go out sailing. He freaked out on me and told me he really wished he could go, and that I was sure that the other guy would be cool with it. The next morning, my roommate and I grabbed some coffee and grabbed some beer to bring along with us on our voyage. We ate some breakfast, and then we headed over to the docks to meet the guy. We were pretty excited, and when we got there, we followed the direction he gave me and found his boat. It was a huge orange and white sailboat. We stood on the dock next to the boat looking at it, when the guy popped his head up from somewhere and immediately showed a look of concern on his face. He jumped off the side of the boat onto the dock next to us. He looked at my roommate and then myself and asked, "Who is this?" I told him he was my roommate, he was cool, and that he had asked if he could come along. I told him I didn't think he would mind. The guy looked very annoyed, and it was awkward as hell for a few moments. The guy kept looking back and forth at the boat and then us. He took his hat off and rubbed his head like he was really stressed out. Eventually he sighed and said it was fine. I'll fast forward now to the part of the story that was scary as hell. A few hours later, we were on the boat, drinking and having fun. The water was pretty smooth sailing, and the sun was shining bright on us. The guy acted a bit off the whole time, and I figured it was because I brought my roommate. After drinking 3 or 4 beers, I felt the courage to ask the guy what was wrong, and if he was still pissed I brought my roommate. He responded with something along the lines of, "It just kind of ruined my plans." My roommate chimed in, with a smile on his face, and asked the guy, "What plans?" I could tell my roommate thought it was funny because it sounded like the guy wanted to be alone with me. The guy looked at him and said, "Well, because you're here, I can't kill him." This took me off guard completely, and I felt fear and unbelievable relief hit me at the same time. My roommate and this guy started cracking up, and my roommate brushed it off as a joke. I honestly didn't know what to think. Was this guy serious? Did I avoid being killed by this asshole? Is his sense of humor just that weird? I believe I got my answer when I went below the deck an hour later to grab another beer from the fridge. Next to his fridge was a brown swinging door that led to a small private bedroom quarters. I was feeling the beer pretty good by this point, and without thinking, pushed the door open. Laying on the foot of the bed was a big-ass cinder block, some yellow rope, tape, and what looked like a recorder of some sort. After seeing that, I felt sick to my stomach and wanted off that boat as soon as possible. I wanted to go back up and confront the guy, but decided against it because of what he might have been on, who knows what he was capable of. Could be on some serious drugs or even worse. What seemed like hours and hours more of being with this guy, we finally made it back to the dock. We said our goodbyes, and on the way back to my room, I told my roommate about what I had seen. He couldn't believe it. I'm pretty damn sure that my roommate saved my life that day by wanting to go with me. And I kid you not, I never saw that guy again on campus. What he had planned, I don't know, and I really don't want to think about it.
This story takes place on a lake in central New Hampshire, just a few miles north of the base of Mount Kearsarge. My friend has a cabin there, and his grandfather built it shortly after returning from the Second World War, and one warm summer night between my junior and senior years of high school, he and I were there, just hanging out. While we did drink and partake in the ganja from time to time, we were not intoxicated in any way on this night. We had simply been bored in our little hometown about 30 miles or approximately 48 kilometers to the south. So on a whim one evening, we decided to drive up and spend the night there, to light a fire and sit by the water on the beach chairs, and enjoy the nighttime t-shirt and swimming trunks weather while it lasted. I would say it was around 9 or 10 p.m., and we had gotten up to inspect his grandfather's old canoe that laid upside down atop the wooden dock because we wanted to use it the next day to head to the lone island to look for loon nests.
and try to catch some catfish. As we walked to the dock from where we had been sitting, I gazed across the lake at Mount Kearsarge. The mountain has a height of 2,937 feet, or 895 meters, and a prominence of 2,080 feet, or 630 meters. So, since it was basically 2,000 feet straight up from our position, as we were only a couple of miles from its summit, it was quite an imposing figure in the night sky. Now the mountain has a tower on the peak that flashes a red light at night. There is only one light, and it is red. I had seen it many times before. It was just a fact, however, as I followed my friend to the dock, that I noticed there were more than 2 lights on this night. In addition to the usual red flashing light, there was a second, yellowish-orange orb to its right, essentially equidistant in height. It was not moving, flashing, pulsating, nothing. It just hung there, motionless in the night sky. I told my friend, who was immediately interested, and so we were both just stood there, transfixed for a while before he asked me what the hell I thought it was. I would have immediately considered a helicopter, but it was just so still and silent. After just a few moments of silent staring, we both shrugged our shoulders and continued down to the canoe at the end of the dock. We inspected it for a while, placing it in the lake to check for leaks, and decided that it was good to go. Which was exciting, as we were really looking forward to getting on the water. After lugging it back to the original resting position, I turned to my right and bent down to wash the cobwebs off my fingers in the lake. As I was doing this, I returned my gaze to the mountain, and to my amazement, there were now 2 identical orbs, one on either side of the red flashing light. I smacked my friend across the shoulder and told him to look up, and again, we just stared transfixed, albeit this time a little more anxiety-ridden. "What the hell?" my friend said, with a bit of fear creeping into his voice. Without averting our gaze, we backpedaled to our chairs and began discussing possibilities. It is important to note that both of us were science-believing realists, and still are to this day. We both accepted the distinct possibility that we, humanity, were most likely not alone in this never-ending galaxy, let alone the universe. Something. All the grains of sand on Earth. You know, the old Carl Sagan adage. So, as we sat, discussing both the Fermi paradox and the likelihood that it was just some sort of temporary, human-made thing going on top of the mountain, something happened. Before our eyes, one of the orbs slowly descended below the backside of the mountain and out of sight. I'm sorry, I know I am no aeronautical engineer or anything, but I know what a helicopter looks like when it descends in elevation. This was not like that at all. It sunk down and out of sight in less than just a few seconds, very smoothly, all without making any lateral movement whatsoever. We were stunned, but before we had time to wallow in this feeling or think that we could have possibly seen something unnatural, the other orb took off from its position. It did not gain or lose any elevation. It just took off horizontally at breakneck speed and began to make its way around the edge of the lake. It was not until the light was about halfway between its starting point and our position that we began to consider that it might be heading straight for us. We stood still at the shore and followed the objects with our eyes. Out of sheer curiosity and without speaking, we both made an unconscious decision to wait and see what would happen. I mean, what else were we supposed to do? At no point did we talk or look at each other. We just stood there, watching. Without leaving you in suspense for too long, the object did eventually arrive to where we were, and upon its arrival, it slowed to a crawl and crept over us at a snail's pace. It was big. Not stereotypically mothership big, but big. I do not know exactly, but if I had to estimate, I would say it was about 50 meters in length by 30 meters in width. It was shaped like a fat cigar, and had 2 or 3 rows of orange lights on its bottom. I cannot tell you what my friend was doing or how he was reacting at this time, for I was entranced. I remember thinking that I had never had an opportunity to view something like this, and I probably would never get another chance again. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, so I stared intensely, examining anything and everything about it that I could. Unfortunately, there were not many details that I could make out, only its approximate dimensions and the rows of lights. It made no real sounds aside from what I perceived to be a very, very faint humming. There were no beams of light shooting down at us or anything like that. We stood in the pitch blackness of the late New Hampshire night, and I remember preparing myself for something to happen to us. But as far as I know, nothing ever did. As soon as it had crept its way past us, it took off as fast as it had appeared, up into the night sky and out of sight. At that point, I shot my head back across the lake towards the mountain. There was nothing but the normal, flashing red light remaining. All appeared to be back to normal. I do not think we said anything to each other aside from, "Let's get out of here," or something to that effect, before grabbing what little we had brought with us and hightailing it back to my friend's car. We drove the 30 miles back to our hometown, purchased some snacks at the convenience store, and returned to his house where we proceeded to set up the same beach chairs that we had brought with us to the lake in his backyard, where we stayed up for most of the night, talking about what the hell we had just seen. For the next few weeks, my mind had hardly focused on anything else. I told my parents at some point, but they sort of just laughed it off, telling me that it must have been a helicopter or something like that. And after their reaction, I decided not to tell anyone else. Not until I was older and gave no crap about what people would think of me. It was only then that I began to tell my trusted friends about what happened that night. My friend and I have since parted ways. We live across an ocean from each other now and talk from time to time. In fact, it has been a few years since one of us brought it up. However, sitting here and writing this down, it just now made me want to reach out and talk with him again. I know what I saw, and it was not constructed by humanity. We do not have that sort of technology, at least, not that we know of. And if we do, there is far more hidden from the average citizen of the Earth than I thought possible. But I am digressing into conspiracy theories now, and that is a path that I try not to go down. The fact is that the possibility that we are alone in the universe is so microscopically small. Consider this. There are billions of planets out there that are much, much older than Earth. All it would take is one of them to have developed intelligent life a few million years before us, giving them a massive head start in the development and technology scheme that would allow them to create machines that could do what these objects are. Thank you for sharing my story, Swamp Dweller. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright strange and unexplainable horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. As always, if you enjoyed these stories, please be sure to smash that like button. The more likes this gets, the more YouTube promotes it, and that's very helpful. Be sure to throw a comment down below, that also helps us. Subscribe if you're new and turn on notifications so you don't miss any beautiful videos that we're dropping here in the swamp. Don't forget that you can find all of our stuff on every podcast platform: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. You can download all of these stories absolutely free and bring them wherever you want. Thank you guys so much for supporting the swamp. I'll see you soon with some more creepy episodes.